thank Darat Funun for collaborating with us on such a short notice. Making this event happen very quickly, very smoothly. I want to thank our speakers for joining us also. We're very happy to be here and excited to basically launch the fall semester of public events of the Amman Lab. The Amman Lab is a regional platform for experimental research and design run by the School of Architecture, GSAP, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation at Columbia University, and by the Columbia Global Centers Middle East, also known as the Columbia University Middle East Research Center, CUMER, based here in Amman. The Amman Lab is part of the global Studio X network, also run by Columbia University School of Architecture. This network is basically a network of nodes which function as laboratories for exploring the future of cities in different transformative regions in the world. There are nodes in Beijing, Rio, New York, Mumbai, Amman, and now emerging nodes in Istanbul and Johannesburg. Basically, these are platforms for which we organize public events, such as this one, exhibitions, symposia, seminars, roundtable discussions and workshops, and also basically courses and workshops. There are also platforms through which Columbia University students and faculty, we have Columbia University faculty with us here, Mário's Gooden, and students also from GSAP, they can come to these, through these platforms and collaborate with experts and students from these different regions. Also, I just wanted to note, if you have any feedback, comments, or any ideas for projects or events, please really don't hesitate to contact us at ammanlab@google.edu. And if you want more information about the SPX network, that's the website right there. I want to introduce our speakers. We have Mário's Gooden, sitting right here. He is a professor of practice at GSAP in Columbia. He's also a principal of Hub and Gooden Architects. Mário is a 2012 National Endowment for the Arts Fellow and a McDowell Quality Fellow. His professional work has been featured in journals and publications including Architecture Magazine, Architecture Records, Metropolis, the New York Times, and Art Forum, and exhibited at the Venice Biennial, the Netherlands Architecture Institute, NAI, the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., and the Municipal Art Society in New York. Professor Gooden's work frequently examines architecture and the translation of cultural landscapes, defined by parameters of race, class, gender, and technology. His urban and cultural theory research was presented at the Dubai Initiative's Urbanism in the Middle East, a search for new paradigms. It was an urbanization workshop in 2011. And he's the editor of Global Topologies, Converging Territories, which is a forthcoming book that's coming out this fall from Columbia University Press. Professor Gooden teaches advanced architectural design and theory at GSAP. His studio focuses on global topics and cultural theory, which is also why he's here with his students in Amman to write this. We also have with us Persekian, curator and producer. Jacques is the founder and director of the التي Gallery, the Ma'amad Foundation for Contemporary Arts in Jerusalem, and he's also the director of the Palestinian Museum. He was recently appointed also as a visiting professor at the Royal College of Arts in London. Jacques was the head curator of the Sharjah Biennial from 2004 to 2007, and the artistic director of the Sharjah Biennial from 2007 to 2011. His recent curated exhibitions include Disorientation in Abu Dhabi 2009, Metal Parts at Busan in Brussels 2008, Dubai Next co-curated with Rem Koolhaas in Germany 2008. And since 2007, continuing on to today, he is also the creator of the Jerusalem Show at the Ma'amad Foundation in Jerusalem, which this year is happening under the umbrella of a larger, also a wonderful event that's taking place in Palestine called Olympia International from November 1st through November 15th. You should also check it out. also have with us Saba, artist and architect. Saba's work reflects her interest in urbanism and the production of space. Her artistic practice has been heavily influenced by her work in architecture and her critical examination of cities. Saba is a graduate of the Jordan University of Science and Technology's architecture program in 2004. In 2009, she joined the team of the reconstruction of the Valley campus in Lebanon. She's taken part in a number of regional and international exhibitions, including the Rotterdam Biennial of Architecture in 2009, a solo show at Jihad Gallery Beirut, and a solo show at Dr. Funun in 2011. She was awarded several grants and residencies, including a production grant by the Arab Fund for Art and Culture for her project on Longing, and now also participated in the inaugural 2011-12 edition of the Art+Power+Space program in Beirut. We also have with us Dina Haddadin, who is also an architect and visual artist living and working in Jordan. Dina is an architect by training and is currently practicing symbiosis designs. In 2008, she attended courses at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Her multidisciplinary work investigates both traditional and experimental techniques, creating multi-layered works, dealing with the struggle over the right to the city and the right to difference in a landscape of transient urbanization. Her work is also a study of places in transition and changing geographies. Through her installations and videos, she aims at breaking away from the traditional idea of the picture space and exploring the relativity of space, both conceptual and physical. She will tell us more about her work in her presentation. Dina participated in a number of local and international exhibitions and workshops and won International Arts Award from Egypt, China, and France. Her first solo exhibition was Transit in March 2010. Dina Haddadin's works are also part of collections in Jordan, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, New York, and London. I will pass on the mic to Mário Gooden, who will introduce the topic of the studio and then lead the discussion for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Nora. It's really a pleasure to be here this evening. One of the main impetus for our conversation this evening on art, power, and space has to do with some of the work which has been going on over the last several years at GSAP in particular, not thinking about architecture primarily as an object that gets made in the landscape, but thinking about architecture in terms of its relationship to cultural landscapes, to politics, to social conditions, not only in the studio that we're working with now, but in past studios and in future studios. This topic, art, power, and space, is the topic that my students, and there are 9 of them here with me this evening, have been researching this semester. They began by looking at the notion of, let's say, space of flows in social media, but then how that space of flows relates to the production of art, the display of art, the commodification of art, and the art market. How do we, as architects, engage in the discourse in terms of constructing a space for discussing art and architecture's relationship to cultural practices. So with that, I'm going to give just a brief introduction. What I've asked is that each of my colleagues here on the panel, following my introduction, will make about a 10-minute presentation. And then there are 3 questions that I pose to them that will sort of put up for everyone to see. And I've asked them to respond to those 3 questions. And then hopefully we'll have enough time for some audience participation for your question, but also some discourse between everyone here in terms of art, power, and space, particularly with regards to Middle Eastern art. So, as Hussein Amir Sardegi states in New Vision Arab Art in the 21st century, one of the main challenges facing art practice in the 21st century Arab art world is the persistence of a constructive oppositional binary between traditional Islamic arts and new art, quote unquote. This binary is based on perceived historical discontinuity between the two. At the heart of this issue is the lack of a written historical context, an art historical context or discourse to place, view, articulate, and evaluate this new production. Adding to the complexities is the nature of contemporary production itself. To start with, many of the region's modern historical developments are contested on various levels. Second, contemporary productions reject their segregation as an other, as has been the case with Islamic art, and as essentially has happened with modern Arab art, which was hijacked by the politics of identity. Yet the effect of the market on informing or misinforming knowledge of the art production of the region, particularly in the absence of scholarly discourse, is problematic and alarming. All reports about the arts of the region assert a booming state of affairs. The Middle East is seen as a vast new source of goodies for the market's limitless voracity, luring the major auction houses such as Sotheby's, Christie's, and Bonhams to the region. Needless to say, the market hype has created positive situations for previously unappreciated artists, but has equally created false hopes and valuations. In relation to a Saatchi Gallery show a few years ago on recent Middle Eastern art, a writer in the London Sunday Times, Brian Appleyard, stated, it would be hard to classify anything in the Saatchi show as great art. But that is not really the point, he said. What matters is the fact that it is art, and that it detonates our simple conceptions of the Middle East. Are we not to expect good art from the Middle East? He argues instead that the arts may be a sign of a new form of secularization. So what exactly is the role of Middle Eastern art? The region remains, as it was in the early decades of the 20th century, beset with conflicts, various kinds of colonizations, from imposed rules by foreign powers to military occupation and now globalization. These conditions do not prevent artists from producing art, but they do, however, influence the parameters of representation and the reception of art. The new art boom, quote unquote, in the Arab world, in the Arab countries, is due to the confluence of many factors. The newly established art organizations, ambitious plans for art museums in the Gulf states, including the Guggenheim and the Louvre, new faculties of art and design, an unprecedented increase in artist residencies, creating opportunities and exposure for Arab artists abroad and for international artists to work in the region. The Arab world, with its social political tensions and contradictions and rising conservatism coupled with chronic political turmoil, provides a rich laboratory for young artists. Yet young Arab artists are looking for answers to the ever more complex trajectories of postmodernity than one that might be found in auction houses. The art boom started backwards in the Arab world. The art market flourished first in the Gulf, before the art support system was actually yet set. The boom and its euphoria spread before school curricula, museums, art critics, or even art scholars began to grapple with the relevant questions. For example, contrary to common belief, what is new in Arab contemporary art, I would say, is not just the mediums that are being employed, but rather it is the image in all its forms that Arab artists have subverted while creating new spaces for interpretation and engagement with the art. And it is these new spaces for interpretation and engagement with the art that we are here to begin constructing tonight. So one of the questions that we will also talk about is, again, how does architecture and art together engage in this call for the construction of new spaces for engagement and interpretation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jack, who will begin us off with this presentation.
Hello. It's okay. Yeah, to kind of answer this question directly, And to get to the point, I think there's a very interesting exercise that I'm basically now glad to be involved in, which is the creation of the new, it's not the new, it's called the Palestinian Museum. So in the concept for this museum, there's of course a building that's going to be built in Birzeit. Nevertheless, the idea of creating a space for art and eventually the production of knowledge in a context like Palestine, where a country is fragmented, littered with checkpoints, complete restriction on mobility, on people in different areas cannot access other areas. So how to deal with that, and how to deal with the idea of creating a space for art in such a context. So the thinking goes further than a building. The thinking goes to the idea of a network, i.e. creating a hub in that place where, in Birzeit, where that building is going to be built, but at the same time create different branches or satellites in different areas. What are you trying to do? Yeah, we can do that here. So create satellites and venues through, of course, not only physically through building or renting or acquiring venues, but also through partnerships with existing institutions in different areas of Palestine, but also outside Palestine, since more than half of the Palestinian population live in the diaspora. And those people, if we think about people who live here, who live in other Arab countries, also Palestinians who live in Latin America or in North America or other places in the world, where the possibility of them coming to that place, that museum in Birzeit, to many of them is almost impossible because of the restriction that Israel imposes on Palestinians coming back to Palestine. So in that sense, you completely reverse the equation. You create an entity, an institution that goes out and finds its constituency and connects with it through different means, through different, as I said, through different protocols, through different forms. Hence, the architecture is completely transformed to almost a kind of a network, some sort of a hyper network of these different people in different places with nodes and gateways in different areas, and all connected through the people. Hence, you create a whole set of staff and organization that can service this, and you design it and you form the architecture around the people who are going to man this program and this operation, regardless, of course, of the physical form or the physical space that this museum is going to occupy. And on one hand, if there is a certain kind of intention to build a building in Birzeit that has a certain aesthetic, that has a certain, kind of space that will accommodate certain type of exhibitions, that does not necessarily limit the kind of program and the kind of art and the kind of production that this institution is going to be involved in, because, as I said, it's gonna manifest itself in different shapes, in different forms, in different ways, according to the context it's going to, or to the context and the people it's going to engage with. Hence, architecture here is transformed into kind of, let's say, I'd like to think about it more as a kind of organizational architecture, an architecture of people working together in different areas, trying to find, as they do for example, in the computer world, in the electronic world, where they have all these logarithms to kind of figure out the equations of how these people deal with each other. In this way, we will have to create these protocols of how to deal, let's say, with a project that is being that's happening here in Jordan, at the same time is happening in Chile, at the same time is happening in Bejala, etc., etc. So this is the kind of thinking that the project is basically envisioning, and actually is now in the process of being implemented, executed. Along these lines, there's another project that I've helped initiate, and again answers or tries to answer the same question given the context of Palestine. We, as different cultural organizations in Palestine, have each had our own projects, given, of course, the resources and the money and the manpower we have operated within a certain kind of, within certain circles, in a certain kind of area, and have never imagined that we would be able, or we would be enabled by more money and more means to kind of expand on that. So the idea that I came up with was the idea of, again, another network, partnership. So now 7 institutions who work relatively across the country, across these barriers and borders, who work in the West Bank, who work in Jerusalem, who work in Gaza, who work also in Nazareth now for the time being, but also who work inside Israel, have joined forces to create an event which Nora had mentioned, and we called it Kalandia International. So this is a kind of, again, an umbrella event that takes under its cover different programs. Each institution has its own program, has its own, the same program that each institution had done for years now. So the Imam Foundation had done the Jerusalem show now for the fifth year. Ruwaq had done the Biennial now for the 3rd time. Qattan, the Young Artist of the Year Award, they've done it for maybe now this is the 6th edition, etc. So what we did is basically in use a very simple formula to just fix the time, which is the 1st and 15th of November. Agree that together we will promote our events under this umbrella title, which is Kalandia International, as one event that crosses Palestine, in all the different directions. We would somehow create a small pot of money just to promote it together. But yet at the same time, each institution would use its own limited resources to do its event, which they, as I said, we had done before, and we know how to do it. But this time, the aggregate created a certain kind of quantum leap. So all of a sudden, there's attention, not only locally, but internationally, that, oh, there's a big event happening in Palestine. Oh, there's a big biennial that is taking place in Palestine. And this also helped us internally because, as I said, each institution was operating within the bounds of its physical means. So Al-Ma'man would operate in and around the old city, Ramallah or Ruwaq and a couple of villages. Now there's an event that is, you know, happening in all these different places at the same time, simultaneously. So now there's a critical mass that definitely raised everything to another level of exposure and have definitely transformed the way people perceive culture, cultural activity and art events in Palestine. So going back to terminology, it's an architecture of partnership. It's an architecture of institutions working together, forming structures that do not have, you know, a physical space, but have many spaces and are able to engage, and people from different places. So we're working in 4 villages, we're working in Gaza, we're working in Nazareth, we're working in Jerusalem, in the Old City, we're working in Ramallah, we're working. So all these people can, from, you know, different people, can plug into this and can basically feel the positive energy that is coming out of this collective.
We're going to hear from my other 2 colleagues, but just very quickly, and also I'd just like to sort of throw something out there for our consideration as we move on, and thinking about how much increasingly more, let's say, cultures are becoming heterogeneous, and diasporic conditions are found sort of everywhere, which also suggests that space, architecture, responses have to be more agile, perhaps, to what's happening on the ground, because it's not happening the same way in any of these locations in which, or any of these nodes in which things might be occurring. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. We'll switch.
I wanted to talk about 2 projects that are the main focal points in my work and my research. One is about Funun and the other is about Darat. But since I don't have much time, I will talk about Darat is a camp that was demolished in 2007 after a conflict between an Islamist fundamentalist group and the Lebanese army. It's in the north of Lebanon, the closest camp to Tripoli. So this very dense core is the camp, and the extension around it is the extension of the camp, but the official camp is the dense spot, kidney shape almost in the center. This is the camp bombarded after the conflict. And this is the camp bulldozed, totally bulldozed. So when I joined the reconstruction team, there was a grassroots committee working on reconstruction of the camp as a participatory, in a participatory process with the people in the camp. But I'm not going to talk about the project itself. I'm going to talk about what happened in parallel to my work in the camp and how what I thought that could be a very revolutionary project to think about how to build the camp and how to rethink how to build temporary spaces. I thought that there is an amazing opportunity that gradually transformed into an
because of the reality on the ground, and because it's absurd to replan a camp and build it. How do you build something that's so accumulative and spontaneous, and try to map it and master plan it, and then work with the people, etc., etc. So it's very complicated. So questions came to mind, and I started thinking, okay, how do we build temporality? How do we build temporariness? And then gradually, meanings, I tried to question meanings of land and meaning of borders and the exile, transition, refuge, all of that. But then the big question appeared that it's not how to rebuild a camp, it's actually how to build without a land. And as poetic as this seems, but also it has so many hidden ideas and politics in this short sentence. The sketches here are the very first things I did, like end sketches, A5 format in the camp. So the first idea that appeared from how to build without a camp is simply you abandon the earth, you just hover above it. So I started taking pictures of the no man's land in the road, or the bulldoze camp, or what's around the camp, and just impose futuristic, irrelevant, impossible structures on it, suggesting that, okay, I'm building without the land. Like the heaviness of a structure that is hovering above empty, untouched, almost virgin lands. They don't make any sense, but somehow they say everything. And by abandoning the land, not necessarily hovering above it, it could be also abandoning it to down under. This is some of the paintings that was exhibited in the exhibition I had in Darat a year ago, exactly a year ago. So same moment. But then I had, for the past year, I had a chance to think more, elaborate on the meaning of building without land by going back to text by Heidegger in particular, that is building, thinking, dwelling, where Heidegger tried to rethink the meaning of dwelling in the time of after modernity, in the time of modernity and after, and how he thought that there is an existential impossibility to dwelling, and the meaning of dwelling is lost to us. And he goes back to language, and he works with language, and that was really inspiring to me. So I thought, okay, so if alienation and the impossibility of dwelling is universal, if it's a human condition, then how can I turn, or how can I dig deeper in this impossibility and discover this another level of this impossibility and attach it to what I feel that it's impossible, to this impossibility of living without a land, because he concludes that what is left for humanity is the poetical dwelling, and what is a poetical dwelling is just poetic. It's the poetic. It's nothing concrete. It's what you do. It's what you feel. It's the gesture. But what I'm trying to argue here that even without a land, even the poetical dwelling is impossible. Sorry. So this was exhibited in Homework Space Project, in the Open Studio Homework Space Project in Beirut last August. Departing from the text, so basically this work is based on the text, but it's a continuation of the previous work I just showed. It works with language and the meaning of building and the meaning of dwelling And through that, I tried to rethink what does it mean, or what does it mean to live without land, and let me read something, maybe it's easier. So this project considers the relationship of construction and land to time, to temporariness that gradually transforms or deforms into durability, referencing the Persekian cause in particular, but also a human alienation in general. The work recognizes the impossibility of construction without the land as self-evident. However, imagining such a possibility may be the first and essential prerequisites to effecting long-due change in architecture and politics. So this space, this L-shaped space, is one work. It's composed of a few objects that interact with the text. It's not here, but it's a body of text. The first object that's in the window here. So I tried to discover the meaning of, or to express this, or understand, try to understand the meaning of building without a land through playing with different objects and different tools. So this piece of paper actually is a record of my attempts to transform a circle into a square that has the same area, which is one of the impossible reconstructions. It's impossible. You don't know that it's impossible, but it is impossible. While doing it, you will become too close of having a circle that has the same square, almost as the hint of hope or emancipation you get when you think of your that it is possible to build without a land. So you keep trying. You're doomed by hope, but you keep recording these failures, and what you get at the end, these are different ways of this of doing or recording this transformation. I always carve the space in between, and what is left at the very end is like a mutated shape that you cannot really tell what it is. And I could go on and on with this process, but you know, it's a sample. And on another, just next to it, like here. Basically, I wanted to explore borders in no man's land. I just wanted to see them. And I took all the border lines, all the frontiers, the Palestinian, Jordanian, Palestinian, Lebanese, Syrian, and Egyptian frontier, and I just turned them into abstract lines from one side, which is not the side from Palestine, and I connected them and played with them, and there's something completely different. And it transformed into a 5-meter long map that I combined with playing on language, trying to translate it well into Arabic, sakana, أو إقامة, أطال التفكير, and then this piece transforms into a poetic attempt of playing with the root of sakana, and then transform it into sukun, which is stillness or death. So by that, even by language, gradually I try to make this argument that it is impossible to dwell, and even more impossible to dwell without land. في غياب هذه الأرض استعصى dwelling بكل الأرض. This is Innab. And this was actually one of the first ideas that I wanted to play with, inspired by the utopian architecture, the work of Constant, New Babylon, and so many other people, radical architects in the 50s and the 60s. I felt that my work is only a continuation to this legacy, so I felt that, okay, I can play with this. So this model is only a cubes suspended in the ceiling. And I tried to make a still life drawing to it as if it exists. And this ink drawing is as if I'm in a room and those cubes are hovering above me, and it's a very hard process, hard task to do such a thing. It was hyper-realistic. And so I'm trying to make a still life of a model that does not exist, and the perspective doesn't work, but you don't know that it doesn't work. So it's all imaginary and does not exist really. But it creates this very visual playfulness that I really liked and I like to work with. So each piece, you see that it made on 3 pieces. And I also chose not to have them aligned because I felt by that I'm trying to transform this into an object and not to a drawing. So I hope I succeeded. I thought that it worked well with the. So basically, you see there is a square and a circle here, the map, and the model faced by this. So these objects, they all together interact with the text that is behind, you don't see. And I felt that maybe this is the first time I feel that this idea is had almost succeeded. I hope that it succeeded to become more of a spatial constellation rather than a 2D image of an imagined structure that is hovering above the land. And what wraps around the space, this is the detail between the two, between the model and the still life in drawing. Sorry. What wraps around the space are paintings, parallel plots, I call them, of more impossible spaces. So I'm done with my presentation. I'm not sure if I have enough time. Is that right? So pictures would not be like, sorry?
We'll come back at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you raised some interesting questions about how to build temporality, the questions of alienation and the possibility of dwelling.
I find it interesting that perhaps if it is impossible to build without land, then the ways in which one thinks about traditional means of representation perhaps have to be abandoned as well. So you start to think about language, or you start to think about how to turn drawing or models sort of on their head, where they become something else and not what one expects. So I think that's really quite interesting. It's kind of 2 sides of the same coin, the temporality and building without land. Dina.
I'm going to start with the struggle that I have with being an architect in my city, since you notice all these architecture as a manifestation of power. It's a struggle over the city. It's a struggle that consumes the identity of the city and its values. Values that are misrepresented and misdirected, they're misinterpreted. With my art, I try to escape my own architecture. I try to find myself and where do I fit in my city. They're questions rather than critiques of what's happening in the city. Study of spaces and transition, and questioning how do we cope with change, and is change necessarily better, and is new necessarily better. My work is an investigation of the struggle over the right of the city, of transient urbanization, a study of places in transition, changing geographies, and imagined places. And how can one resist when change leads to a perception or deception of progress, defined only by new construction. I'm going to read a couple of poems. This image. We are the city, subsumed in endless binaries, outsiders and deep insiders. The city will decay and flourish. We are the city of unseen forces and changes, behind edges of imperious billboards and empty moments of illusion, awaiting what's beyond. So I'm going to start with how do I study such questions. I use paintings as sculptures. This is a study of a construction site, which is the usual scene that we pass by every day. It's part of our everyday landscape now. Construction sites which are left suspended, especially after the economic crisis now. So it's part of our everyday landscape. Another, for example, concrete mixer is a symbol for me of the state of transit, this in-between state. And, for example, the workers on the construction sites, for me, I portray them as heroes because they are the true force of change, yet they're helpless in the city. One project that I did a couple of years ago was an exhibition in an abandoned house where the rooms and the corridors were my tool. What I tried to do is, it was going to be the restaurant, if anyone knows, it's Sufra at Rainbow Street. So I tried to depict this in-between state, between what was and what will be, and expand this edge or line into a margin. The margin that welcomed a lot of people. It became from a non-place and it became space or a place. So these are a couple of images of the spaces before and after. One room, for example, was a story about the cinema Rainbow, which is on the same street. This is an interactive video installation where the viewer is left to question what follows deconstruction, and rather than just dwelling on ruins, one is invited to imagine through the elements of reconstruction what will happen, what will it be. Another room was the threshold that I created. I invited people to just pass by through this suspended tower of this fragile envelope. The envelope is made of old newspapers that I found in the house, which was in the same state, this in-between state. It was being demolished, and there was this video projection with sand, and with my hand I was trying to erase parts of the sand to expose what's written. And these newspapers are from the 50s and 60s era, from Palestine, from Lebanon, and from Jordan. And you can read all these stories at that time. So it's like a frozen tower, a suspended tower that captured this in-between state. Another project was Transit Terminals, which is performance. It's a study of the urban public spaces in Amman. Spaces that are being, for example, this is the Ragadan bus terminal downtown, which is a very important hub for transportation, selling, buying, commuting. So it's a very important it's a public space, and at one point it was relocated several times into Mahatta and later to the northern terminal. And such projects, which are more towards the business or touristic projects, they affected the urban fabric of the city and the small businesses in the area, and became more of a ghost building. And today I just read that they opened the market there, a charity market, just today, temporary charity market. So I created these towers, or like bus stops, mobile bus stops, that will move around these three terminals, the main terminals, Mahatta, Ragadan, and Abdali. And they're placed in these stations and carried with the help of the public, which resembles the temporality of decisions which are made by authority and the government, and how it affects the public fabric. This is still a video animation of people carrying these, because people are, the need of the people is the sheer force behind these decisions, yet they're burdened with such changes. So in the city of such changing geographies and transient landscape, one is always trying to find this concrete monument. Where is my monument in the city? In the city, such like Amman, which was not built around monuments like European cities or older cities like Damascus or Cairo. Monuments can be found in non-places, in the streets or in the staircase, or in a building such like Cinema Khayyam, which was a very important cinema house, and it's a symbol of modernity of the city. And now it's just another structure, an empty structure, abandoned building standing there in the city. So for me, this is a monument. Some sketches here depicting these grounds, these empty grounds or non-places, and into the sky, escaping the chaotic city, and creating these non-structural monuments. A staircase, for example, can be a margin that you escape to as refuge for your memories or your dreams. Another aspect that I'm interested in is the emptiness, or what could become of emptiness. Emptiness in the sense of this is a video that I took. A building that I knew for a long time next to my studio, and by night it turned into this. It was demolished and it turned into this negative hole in the ground. And I questioned how would a passerby the next morning perceive this negative space or this hole? Is it just a hole? Is it emptiness? So these questions. These are a series of paintings of negative spaces and holes in the ground, questioning what are these spaces. I don't really have an answer, but they have this very strong energy. This is a sculpture, for example, casts of concrete and the crack and the negative in between. This is an installation with using 40, 50 scaffolds to create a space where you can't enter and you walk around, which resembles this in-between state and questions what could become of emptiness. Another installation with the scaffolds is where I filled this room with scaffolds. And at the end of the room, there was this projection of a building that stands on the third circle next to the Royal Hotel, a building with only the skin of the building, where you can't see the slabs or the columns. It has a long story, and it's been standing like that for quite a long time. It's really fragile, and people might not notice it. So here you try to get to the projection to see it clearly, but really can't see it clearly because of all the construction and demolition going around it. And I did these casts of parts of the walls of the house of concrete to try and archive this fragile skin. These are casts of the cracks in the walls and the textures of the stone. And they're stacked in a way like to archive it. Yeah, so this is briefly a quick look at the work.
Fantastic.
stay with us.
Dina have really given us quite a bit to think about. Some of the things which immediately come to mind are that I think each of you sort of spoke about, let's say, your practice or the work that you are doing in terms such as, and conditions which are not static, not fixed, which are temporary or in between or in transit, ephemeral conditions of alienation, emptiness, abandonment. And I'm trying to work my way to this first question in terms of what is the role of contemporary Middle Eastern art. But the other thing is, I suppose, is that you weren't necessarily suggesting that there was a solution, but that these were questions. And so I'm wondering, is that the role for contemporary Middle Eastern art as young artists to sort of raise these questions about the cultural landscape? I don't know which one of you might like to take that question on first.
Actually, I wanted to start with the third question.
Okay.
Because I felt it has all the answers in it. So, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Throw it out.
Basically, but I think I wanted to start with the last question because I felt that maybe we need to think whether architecture is able, from the first place, to do that or not, to provide these spaces, to embrace those initiatives. Architecture in general, I'm not talking about architecture in the region or anywhere else. Architecture. And also I feel to be able to answer this question, I also feel that I need to draw a line between this question and the evolution, or try to hint to how the built environment had evolved in Arab cities. Can I refer to, I wanted to refer to an article that was published in the Beiruti magazine in 1864 that celebrates the new taste of the new buildings in the city, and how this rational simplicity of such new building is better than the older taste. So this magazine was called Hadadin Beirut Gardens, and it comes to my attention that what is this new taste and what is this older taste? And this rational simplicity, is it what modernity had brought to the region through a dynamic exchange, or is it simply a hollow imitation of the European master, if I may say, that replaced the Ottoman one? So, and by that, I think it's a very hard question to answer. But I can comfortably say that there was an imitation, and there's no harm. But the problem is that, according to so many philosophers, modern philosophers, simply it's very obvious that when modernity as an ideology and as an ethical ideology and as a value, when it's simply transformed into a form, it declares its own death. So we started from a death of this hollow imitation. And let me go back to my question of translation and what is lost in translation. Modernity means hadata, and if we go back to the root of hadatha is hadatha, which means happened, or event, maybe hadath, or maybe an accident. So is modernity an accident which brought an accident of exiles, an accident of borders, an accident of forced capital, etc., etc., etc. So change has here become, I see change here as an incomplete mutation of this hollow imitation. So it is an accident and not an event, maybe, which is an accident of a post-colonial or more of a post-colonial product. So, and this also brings me, let me make a very severe jump to our current days and say, okay, maybe if we look at the promised Louvre and Guggenheim and NYU and Saadiyat Island in Abu Dhabi, it's practically the same, but with a different attitude and a different attitude and approach, and also it has a different value because of its reclaimed power through money. And it's doing the same simply by bringing a name, a history, and displacing it in another context, and the only competition is the salary. So, current capitalism is putting the intellect, the mind, the body, and the imagination at work.
Well, I think that's an interesting question. Is architecture, is modernity or modern architecture an accident or an event? I mean, I wonder, Jackie, the way that you described the museum in Palestine or Palestinian art, you actually really did talk about it as a set of events or as a set of nodes. It's not a kind of fixed condition, but it leads me to think of architecture having to be a network that also is not about necessarily being a set of fixed nodes at any particular point in that network, but also being about events because, as I mentioned earlier, it seems that each location is going to be different, and how space or how whatever happens there is going to have to respond not to the past, not necessarily to the future, but to that very sort of present. And that brings us perhaps back to the event. So maybe there is an architecture of the event rather than an architecture of the object as we're proposing for this museum.
I mean, architecture is art, right?
Is it?
I think so. I mean, at least to me. And I mean, it's just that architects have more power because they have means, right? People to sponsor their ideas and create physical, concrete spaces out of their ideas. While artists have been, for a long period of time, if we're talking about the region, at least as you're asking me the question, have been on the sidelines, have been kind of, they've been perceived as decorative, they've been perceived as, accessories. Of course, accessories is the double meaning of the word. So, but things have changed, right? Now, art in general have moved from the aesthetic to the social context. Yeah, artists are engaged, and I think architects are engaged now in the issues of the people and where they work and where they belong. So in that sense, you can't imagine, for example, yourself in a place, I don't want to keep dwelling on Palestine, but you can't imagine yourself where people are not getting paid, and they have no salaries because their country is bankrupt, and then you're indulging with in another, kind of Guggenheim franchise, right? You can't imagine that. That's almost unethical in a way. So I think that the thing that I was talking about, not to be fixated by the idea, but what I'm talking about are these collaborations. So be it an architect, an artist, a social worker, a scientist, or in whatever discipline one is interested in and has decided to kind of pursue knowledge end. I think people are more coming together to work towards resolving these issues. At least people who I'd like to work with. So if I'm thinking about a museum, then I would naturally align myself with these people, regardless of what profession they are. I mean, yeah, I know, and I've seen, and Lara's here to talk about the, where are you? To talk about the landscaping, and I know that some people are spending money on designing a place and a garden for it too. But that's a triviality in when you look at the bigger picture, you know. And so I don't know who had the chance to see, for example, Documenta this year, where it's seen all sorts of projects, you know, kind of being presented as part of the discourse, and not limited to any kind of discipline. So maybe my answer to your questions is that, you know, open it up a little bit. Don't be fixated about the market and what contemporary art in the Middle East does, or how is it influenced or not influenced. You know, don't get bucked by that, because that kind of question is driven by market forces. It's driven by the Christies and the Sotheby's and the few collectors who are trying to kind of, you know, raise the value of their collections and, you know, what have you. But the issues at heart are somewhere else, completely you know, in a different world. You know, again, don't think about Palestine, think about Greece, think about Spain, think about Afghanistan, think about what's happening in Syria, think about all these people. And I know that some artists, for example, and you've seen documented that some artists are also kind of somehow jump the gun and are using some footage from what's produced in Syria as material for artwork. You know, that sometimes happens, you know, and we can forgive them for that. But the essence is that the discourse is changing, and people are empowered, and people have changed things in the art world. And that's, I think, where we need to kind of, you know, that's where we need to start.
So would you say that the way in which the discourse is changing is subverting what the previous hegemony in terms of what the discourse was? Or
absolutely, absolutely. And as I said, if the architects per se, in this context, if they don't align themselves with this subversion, I mean, they'll be considered by other people, at least myself, you know, here, I can only speak for myself. I think what they do would be, you know, kind of almost decadent.
Almost
decadent.
Well, I mean, but then decadent, then you're talking about the Louvre and Gooden. I mean, the epitome of decadence, perhaps.
Yeah, and obsolete.
And also obsolescence.
As Saba saying.
Dina, would you like to?
Yeah, I think they're all contemporary Arab art is becoming more and more towards global issues, or not necessarily. It's what we're living. It's how we deal with our cities, with social and cultural and economic issues. That it's everywhere. It's not really about the Arab region, or this is how I feel as an artist. It's what we're living, and I think the issues is now becoming more and more global. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I mean, I really like what you guys are saying, actually. I think, I mean, Jack, you just pushed it and said that's not the way we should look at it. I think artists also have a choice. I mean, if they want to be part of the big, sexy, Christie Sotheby's, they know where to go. And if they're interested in pushing their own work, questioning, I don't know if they, I mean, discourse like you said, there is a gap in writing and discourse and critique in the Arab world, and I think that's a whole discussion on its own, actually, because it's always a reference to the West. So, I mean, you start with Middle Eastern art, and I don't know if any of the artists here would like to categorize themselves within that little box, because then automatically we're sensationalizing, or we're opening up the chance for, you know, Palestinian camps in Lebanon. And you have all of these key words that are so easy to use, actually, that immediately can put you on the map. So I think whereas in both, well, all three cases actually, what they are doing is they're just actually immediately interested in their environment, which is, that's what counts before, I mean, it's clear that that's what they're speaking to the local without sensationalizing it. And I mean, you have a really good example of three people who are, hopefully they will contribute to international art discourse and not so box. I'm not so with the East and West and Middle East and Arab Middle East and Arab world, and I mean, I don't know where it's going to go there.
It'd be great if, you know, you could open up these questions to anyone in the audience who has answers or questions.
But that is part of the contention that has to be subverted as well. Would you agree? And I think that anyone sort of looking at or viewing Bob's work or Dina's work would not necessarily identify the work as Middle Eastern artist or Arab art or what have you. And I think that's part of the. So I think the questions here are certainly much more of a provocation than trying to box in or pigeonhole the discussion that we're having this evening, but really to kind of provoke and say, okay, well, this is what we're actually trying to subvert or push against or sort of undermine in perhaps any number of different ways. But maybe we should, as Nora was trying to do, open it up to the audience for some response to the questions or for some additional questions.
I'd like to go back to some of what was previously said. There's a question to Jack, actually. So you talked about architecture of networks and architecture of people. And I was wondering if you can speak a bit about the significance of the name of Qalandia International. And, I mean, I know Qalandia, I've been there a couple of times, and it's such a powerful yet very powerless place as well. And so maybe you can speak about that, like from the perspective of art, space, and how.
Who knows Qalandia? Okay. Okay. I'm going to Qalandia. Of course, it's the worst place you can ever be. You know, it's a miserable checkpoint. It's a dirty, gridlock of cars, and people. It's a place for really humiliation. I mean, you can never see anywhere like that. You know? And people know it in the news. But when we were thinking about the name for this umbrella, for this virtual pavilion, again, I'm trying to talk in your language, use your terminology. We were thinking about the history. And the history of Qalandia is that it's a town that in 1948 kind of welcomed refugees who flew from, in 1948, in Innab. So they've created this huge refugee camp there, and it became Qalandia refugee camp. But Qalandia also happens to be an airport. It used to be called Jerusalem International Airport. So everybody knew it as Qalandia Airport. And this was the, kind of the exit entry point for Palestine before 1967. So it was the kind of gateway to the world, Colombia. And then 1967 came, the airport was closed, and 2000 came, a checkpoint was built, and 2003, a whole wall came to kind of split the town in half. So we thought the history of this place, you know, kind of epitomizes the history of Palestine. You know, starting from, you know, kind of a place, a town, relatively quiet, that all of a sudden became a refugee camp, then, you know, happens to be an airport where, you know, there's the possibility of, you know connecting to the world, but then all of a sudden abruptly interrupted because of the 1967 war, and then eventually a checkpoint and the wall, you know, comes to kind of superimpose that, you know, daily humiliation on the same people. So we thought in that name, you know, it reflects on what have become of us, what we were and what have become of us. And since it is, you know, the word Colombia is so well known because of the checkpoint, and then when you create an argument, you know, and name it after that, people will start questioning why do you name an art event like Glasgow International, Adelaide International, Colombia International, you know, and then, you know, why would you name such a horrible place for an art event? So that's why we use Colombia for that event. Yet it's not about Colombia at all. The event has, I mean, I don't know if we're going to do anything in Colombia. We're still debating it, and now the final decision is to maybe do something in Colombia town rather than on Colombia checkpoint, which was the initial idea for the opening. But it's still, you know, kind of up for the discussion amongst the different partners, and I think now maybe the opening would be symbolically in the old town, which is not where you cross. You have to go all the way around from, if you know Ramallah, you have to go all the way around from it's that area called where these big hotels are now in Ramallah. Drive down and go to because everything now is. You have to, you know, it takes you a whole day to get from one place to another. So that's
I really appreciate kind of how you're talking about the approach that the architects and designers are taking for the Palestine Museum. And sure they're going to, the architects designing the Palestine Museum and designers.
they're not pieces.
No, not this. I'm going back to what we were talking about earlier.
It's the concept.
The concept for the museum itself, exactly.
Yeah, not the,
So
the architects have nothing to do with it.
But in designing it, you'll have to deal with the concept, I guess, ultimately. So
No, unfortunately not.
Oh.
No. Go.
Okay. Well, my question is actually for Saba and Dina more so. I was curious to see or to hear from you what kind of things you've learned and understood through explorations and experiments in art and architecture that are perhaps not didn't result in built objects, but there are explorations nonetheless. And I was curious if this kind of thing has fed back into your practice in architecture, or has it remained isolated more so on canvases and in two-dimensional spaces or installations?
They definitely feed each other somehow, but in my art it's just questioning, and it's an exercise for me that I have to do to understand my surroundings and my role in this, in architecture and in the built environment. It's a bit scary when you think how far the architecture is, and it scares me sometimes because it's very temporary. These concrete walls can, in a minute, be demolished and become bare walls. So this tension between art and architecture, I'm in the process of finding finding where do I fit. So it's a bit difficult question. So I'm not sure if I have an answer.
Of course, they feed one another, but also, yeah, I always felt that I have never done art. I always do architecture. So even the paintings, the mapping, they're all exercises to me. They fall into the architectural discipline because I think in the logic of architecture, like how the architect think, the mapping, the analysis, the dissecting of a place and its parameters. So yeah, of course it influences my work, but I have lost faith in architecture in its current shape. Meaning I feel that there is a necessary revolution to the tools of architecture and how we think about it. I feel there is an urgent necessity to rethink this logic and try to find, if we believe in architecture as a form of emancipation, we need to do that. Otherwise, it's only a consequence of forms and shapes that once meant something. It meant something at some point, but now it's the situation and the ideology, the philosophy, the core, the value of architecture is deteriorating more and more. And I think that architecture had abandoned its symbolic and allegoric values and how it's able to embrace human communication in favor to capital, to not even before capital, into functional efficiency, which was later on consumed and abused by the capital. So yes, there is the danger. I'm in a danger zone because I truly lost faith in the power of design now, and I feel that change should happen.
My question is, how do you feel politics reflects on architecture? And my second question is, how can we take this into action? Why just stop at just the research or through the art? There is some form of architecture, let's say. Well, what is the next step? How can we transform this into something solid? How can we take action and transfer this to something that people can actually use? Why is it just, let's say, a dream or something that we can just look at? Why can't we just feel this thing? That question is for everyone, for whoever can answer.
Well, I'm with you on that. I mean, that's, so I want to make sure that my students hear that as well. That it's more than just a dream. Of course, we have a limited amount of time in terms of the design projects that they do, but to Saba's point about a revolution in terms of what architecture can do, and I would say a revolution in terms of process, perhaps, that we need to think about new processes in terms of how architecture comes about. So rather than thinking about architecture as the object or as the singularity, I think that architecture can be a system, it can be a network, it can be a structure, it can be a process even. And so what comes out of that process then, perhaps something might get built in this site, might get built in that site. So perhaps the new museum becomes not a singular building, but it becomes something which occupies the landscape in various locations. Perhaps it becomes a series of events which happened at various times in various locations. But I think we have to rethink the process. And that's part of my goal as, I suppose, as a practicing architect, but also as someone who's trying to teach other architects coming forward, is how to rethink the process And one of the things that we were doing in this particular studio is that actually we started outside of architecture. We started looking at the space of social media to think about how relationships are formed within social media, and to think about now how that might sort of fold back into our thinking, into our process for making architecture. But I think it comes down to rethinking the process.
So I have a question. Power, space, power, art, and space is very powerful. Because it's space and art metaphors of power. And from this discussion, I realized I captured shyness in manifesting power, either in architecture or art and influencing change. So, what are we doing to bring to empower artists and architects to be able to create these spaces and to empower the culture, the values that are necessary for the future?
Power back to us.
It's for the panel, yes.
Yeah, I think what we need is a collaborative space or a social structure or an engine to debate, a space to communicate. We like our urban cities, we like the urban public spaces, and I think for artists, we like our communal expressive spaces where we meet and we critique and we give feedback. And I think that this is what we need and what our cities need. It's funny because urbanity really is a very essential part of architecture and the single cell or the building. So I think we need to start to look at the city and the mesh of needs in the urban fabric and find these nodes that we're talking about. Imagine having these spaces in non-places in the cities, in a small alley or in the construction site where we can have this cell or this pavilion or this node which interacts with the social, cultural and political layers in the city. So there's a lot that we need, I guess, to be empowered as artists and as architects.
I believe in accumulation, actually, accumulation of thoughts, and let me combine my answer to your question and the question before. I don't think that it's either dreaming or imagining or action. I think it's a process, and one leads to another, and it's necessary actually to imagine change to make it happen. It's the first step. But also being radical helps, being down to earth helps, being I don't know, crazy, conservative, whatever you want. So it's about all these attitudes and approaches of tackling a subject matter. And to be honest, it's not about, I think it's not about need, it's about shifting from the position of need to the position of desire. You desire change, you do it. So it's not about, and yeah, it's a reverse, I believe in this reverse process of not, first things first. No, desire and need, because you flip the pyramid, and by that, by rethinking the process, rethinking space, rethinking architecture even, it's why is it so holy? Why is it so sacred? Why does it have this power? I mean, just break it and think about it. Even think about the tools of representation. They're so rigid, a plan, section, perspective, that's it. So I think it goes down, I think we are in a moment that all of these approaches are essential, and it's not exclusive to Amman or any other city. It is, I feel it is an existential problem. It's a universal one. Yeah.
add that it seems to me also that representation has to be applied to how the artist is represented or how the architect is represented. So, and I think in terms of thinking about the collaborative or the collective, that the architect is not the kind of singular sort of person sort of working in his or her studio who's remaking the world, but architecture as a collaborative process. Perhaps also not thinking of the artist as the lone voice, but the discourse that happens amongst groups of artists in terms of not necessarily reconstructing power as a kind of hegemony, but power as a kind of distributed condition.
We're going to wrap up very soon, but I'm wondering how many questions are left on the floor. So we're going to take this one last question, and then wrap it up.
This won't take long because it's just a quick question for anyone who's willing to answer. Dina, you mentioned monuments, and I observed that you're right. These new cities that we live in, especially specific to the Middle East, are so lost, and they haven't really been given any, or what I would like to see as monuments. And I'm wondering what you, as architects and artists who are constantly studying this, what you believe the monument of contemporary society should be, and where you think we should head in terms of monumentality. What do you think should be the next monument in our city?
Well, in my investigation, it's the non-monument I'm looking for. So,
it raised the opposite question for me, that's all I knew.
Yeah. What could the monument be? I think it should be a celebration of like social monuments, or a place that tells a story or a dream or an aspiration of some kind. That's why for me monuments are stories that you find in the staircase or in the building.
Well, I think that I'd rather think of them perhaps as the sort of anti-monument, which perhaps then means we're not thinking about sort of monuments, but we're thinking about how stories or how memories get collected. So it doesn't become something which is, let's say, heroic in the way that we sort of think about monuments, but it becomes something which becomes really part of the everyday, part of the everyday experience. Jack, did you want to add something? Okay.
Great. Thank you all so much for coming. We are also, I want to announce just November 7th, we're going to have, so basically Calenda International is also branching out to Amman through the Robotic Biennale, which is also part of this umbrella. And we will have, it's actually a 3-day symposium. The day in the middle is a tour on modern architecture in Amman. The first day is on the 4th in Ramallah, and then on the 7th we will have a day-long symposium on modernity in Amman at the Columbia University Middle East Research Center here. We'd love to see you there, and please, to help us out, sort of creating a database in the community, and also to reach out to you for feedback, for projects, for whatever, please do sign your names on the blank sheets of paper that are on your way out, and your emails so that we can get in touch. I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.